What if, on the day you expected joy and peace, a storm hovered invisibly over your dreams? In a tranquil town laid against golden fields of an amber state, life woke early with promise. And for Checker, it was not just another day. It was the day that would decide the fate of love, legacy, and secrets buried deeper than rivers. Checker sat on the edge of his neatly made bed, his hands nervously tracing patterns across the fabric. Outside, the world glimmered with the first beams of sunlight, painting reddish gold streaks through his curtain. There was a peculiar quiet, the kind that draws breath before the music begins. Checker's heart raced with anticipation, the beat drumming not with fear, but exhilaration. For years, prayer had kept him steady. Hard work had shaped his nights, and simple kindness had made him beloved in every corner of the community. His upbringing, sculpted by a mother's fierce love and resilience after the loss of his father, was humble yet rich with the values many had forgotten. The smell of breakfast drifted through the house. Yet for Checker, food was the last thing on his mind. He was about to wed Amarachi, the only woman whose presence made his careful composure unravel, revealing depths of hope and longing. His business thrived, but he kept away from vices, living with dignity and honesty that made locals speak his name with admiration, even reverence. Today, however, admiration flickered into celebration. It was a day that would not only mark the union of two souls, but bring together stories, communities, and, as fate would have it, haunted histories that no one suspected. Moments later, a knock at the door snapped Checker out of his reverie. Emma, his closest companion since boyhood, entered the room, already dressed in matching Egbata. "Guy, today is your day." Emma beamed, the excitement sparkling in his eyes and echoing in his voice. Checker returned the smile, nerves and joy battling in his chest. "It feels like a dream, one I don't want to wake up from." Emma laughed, his tone a mix of teasing and deep affection. "Trust me, you're awake, and today you're about to marry the most radiant woman in the whole town." The statement hung in the air, pressing into Checker's heart, making him realize again, not all dreams must end. Today, his dream was coming true. If you were to stand outside on this morning and close your eyes, you would hear not just laughter, but the rhythm of hundreds of hearts beating in eager anticipation. Checker stretched, gathering himself for the avalanche of tradition waiting outside. He wanted readiness. He wanted control. In the bustling compound, a festival of preparation unfolded. Bright chairs formed careful lines across the yard. Decorators darted, streamers in hand, draping color and hope across every surface. From the kitchen, the smell of frying meat and jollof rice wafted, a scent that had always meant celebration, family, and sacred joy. The moment Checker stepped outside, his mother, Mama, greeted him with a smile so broad it chased away any lingering ghosts of adversity. "My son," she whispered, almost as if the joy needed secrecy to remain real. "God has done it for us. Just look at today." Her hands, rough yet gentle, wiped away the flour from her wrapper, arms open for a hug that wrapped years of sacrifice in a single embrace. Checker held her tightly, wishing his father could have been part of this day. "Mama, I wish Papa was here. He is watching from heaven, my son," Mama replied, her voice trembling with pride. "He'd be very proud of you, Checker, proud beyond words." Inside the quiet of his room, Checker faced the mirror. His outfit, an immaculate white abaya with gold embroidery, reflected both tradition and new possibilities. Red coral beads lay on the table like silent witnesses. Emma, ever present, helped adjust the cap on Checker's head. "You know," Emma began, voice low and thoughtful, "Amarachi is lucky. Not every man would have the patience you showed, considering where she comes from." Checker's brow furrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" Emma hesitated, the words heavy with the weight of local rumors. "Her family isn't warm. People say they're proud, secretive, that they keep things beneath the surface. But Amarachi, she's nothing like that. I've seen how she loves you." Checker smiled, waving off the old tales. "I know Amarachi. I know her heart, and today nothing else matters. She'll be my wife before sunset." A spark flared within him, one of certainty and courage. Often, love was forced to fight between what the heart knows and what the world whispers. Today, Checker chose love and truth. Stories are sometimes written in eyes, not mouths. On the far side of town, in a grand white house, Amarachi's day began with far less laughter and far more tension. As makeup artists brushed powder across her cheeks, as stylists fussed over each loose strand of hair, and bridesmaids hovered, Amarachi's mind retreated to a place no conversation could reach. In the reflection of her dressing mirror, Amarachi saw not just herself, but fragments of anxiety swirling beneath her serene expression. Each glance at the glass shifted the story, her face composed but her eyes distant, as if she listened to a voice only she could hear. Every routine touch of her fingers was almost ritualistic, counting, grounding, ensuring reality remained beneath trembling nerves. A moment of uncertainty cut through the morning's gloss. "Amora, are you okay?" Kioma, her most trusted bridesmaid, asked, voice laced with concern. Amarachi blinked quickly, forcing a smile. "I'm just thinking," she replied, but her tone betrayed her. Kioma grinned, trying to reassure. "It's normal to be nervous. Today is the day you'll remember forever." Amarachi nodded, but inwardly turmoil churned. As the bridal veil lowered over her hair, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. The veil moved, ever so slightly, in a manner that felt unnatural, a brushing that no hand claimed. "Did you feel that breeze?" Kioma asked, eyes narrowing. "No," Amarachi said too quickly, the denial echoing louder than her whisper. Madame Ephema entered then, tall, regal, with a beauty sharp as her reputation. Her smile, poised and measured, failed to reach her eyes. "You look beautiful, my dear," she intoned, but even her praise seemed rehearsed. Amarachi rose, accepting the words, but sensing layers beneath them. Madame Ephema laid a hand on her daughter's shoulders, her grip both loving and controlling. "Today must go smoothly," she murmured. "No mistakes allowed." Fear flickered across Amarachi's face, an emotion she covered with obedience and silence. Outside the door, Chief Damien waited, pacing with authority, clutching his walking stick. For him, the wedding was not about emotion, but about power, appearance, and respect. Nothing could be allowed to go wrong. But even as the guests arrived and laughter rose, an invisible tension wound its way beneath every sparkling surface, threatening to overturn what had been promised only in words. Some days carry a shadow you cannot see, but you can feel. In a church built on prayers and hope, Pastor Ayula was on his knees before dawn, his hands clasped, his soul restless. Lord, bless this marriage. Let love reign. Let no evil enter this house today, he whispered, but an icy chill crept through his heart. He rose from prayer and peered out the window as guests arrived in droves, dressed in finery, snapping photos, and celebrating as if tomorrow's fortunes were guaranteed. Yet Pastor Ayula's spirit could not shake the growing storm, rolling beneath the joy. A whisper, not of sound, but pure intuition, pressed into his thoughts. Watch closely. Do not be distracted. Something is hidden. There was a heaviness in the pastor's steps. Over a lifetime, he had shepherded countless weddings, witnessed love and heartbreak, served as both guardian and witness to 1,000 covenants. But today, something else, something ancient, lingered unseen. As the choir rehearsed final harmonies and ushers arranged guests into polite lines, the church gleamed, immaculate, a tapestry of white cloths, rose petals, and a breathtaking arch of flowers. The surface shimmered with the promise of new beginnings, but beneath those petals, thorns waited. Checker and Emma entered, leading the groomsmen, welcomed by the crowd's cheer. Photographers snapped their journey, documenting every moment as history. Checker took a moment to hug his mother, her face radiant and yet tinged with silent prayer. In the sanctuary, Checker waited at the altar, nerves tangled with hope. Emma leaned close, sharing the intimacy only best friends possess. "You look nervous," Emma teased. Checker laughed, anxiety and excitement crisp in his voice. "I feel like I could explode from happiness." The music shifted, signaling an entrance. Doors opened, and Amarachi began her walk down the aisle, a vision in white, moving as if gravity had softened for her alone. The church fell into a reverent hush. Even infants stopped crying. For a moment, every heart beat in perfect unity, absorbing the sacredness that seemed to flow from Amarachi's presence. Checker's eyes shone, utterly consumed by the beauty crossing toward him. Every celebration carries the risk of intrusion, and often the first sign hides behind innocence. Amarachi, escorted by her father, was merely at the altar when a tremor disturbed the perfect scene. A little girl in the congregation suddenly burst into tears, pointing and crying, "Mommy, her eyes! Her eyes are like snake eyes." The mother, embarrassed, hushed her quickly. It was dismissed as childish fantasy, but Pastor Ayula's gaze sharpened, his spirit prickling with alarm. As Amarachi stood beside Checker, she seemed peaceful, unbothered. Yet the pastor felt a growing heaviness, a suffocating pressure around his heart. He whispered beneath his breath, "Lord, if this is truly what my spirit suspects, show me." Moving forward, he welcomed everyone to witness the sacred union. The crowd clapped, faces split between anticipation and tradition. Yet a shadow lingered in Pastor Ayula's eyes. His smile, carefully crafted, no longer reached past his lips. The pastor gently placed a hand on Amarachi's shoulder to begin the prayer. Instantly, a chill, sharp as winter glass, shot through his arm. He recoiled, shaken by a sensation not born of mere nerves, but of something ancient and malign. Meeting her gaze through the veil, time seemed to warp. A split second, but enough for him to see. Amarachi's eyes were not brown anymore. They gleamed yellow, slit like a snake's, staring back with unknowable hunger. He blinked, the vision evaporating as quickly as it had appeared. But fear, rooted deep within him, reaching places sermons could not exorcise easily. This was no ordinary wedding. Something ran deeper here, something that threatened not just love, but life itself. Pastor Ayula looked at Checker and Amarachi again, then quietly whispered the truth that would define the hours to come. This is not just a wedding. This is war. Subscribe and hit like. Our powerful stories add years to your life. Join our Story Lovers Club and let us know in the comments. Where are you listening from? What would you do if, on the edge of happiness, the world whispered warnings only you could hear? As Pastor Ayula steadied his voice, the air seemed charged, not just by the power of tradition, but by a tension too ancient, too primal to ignore. Checker looked into Amarachi's eyes, his face open with joy, never suspecting the whirlpool of emotion tangled beneath her calm exterior. In front of the congregation, the ceremony began with a gravity that stilled every heart. Today, we witness not just a union, Pastor Ayula intoned, his voice echoing with melodious authority, but the birth of two families joined as one, in the eyes of God and before the entire village. Silence bloomed, drawing everyone into the sacredness of the moment. Checker, holding Amarachi's hands, felt a surge of warmth, her skin smooth, her fingers trembling just slightly, as if she too wrestled with forces hidden below the surface. The vows were exchanged, echoing through the hallowed hall, words of eternal fidelity, pledged in voices clear and steadfast. Each phrase seemed to belong to all those present. Every mother, every father, every son and daughter, woven into a tapestry of hope and quiet expectation. But for Mama, Checker's mother, the joy was laced with bittersweet memory. She remembered the day she herself had stood at the altar, prayers thick on her tongue, only to watch her husband swept away by sickness and time. Today, she saw in her son the hope of legacy, a chance to turn grief into celebration. Tears shimmered in her eyes, not of pain, but of overwhelming gratitude. Her Checker, now a man, forging his own path. Amarachi's mother, Madame Ephema, sat motionless, a queen on her throne, her sharp gaze shrouded with unreadable intent. To the world, she was elegance incarnate, the very picture of pride and control. To Amarachi, she was both mother and monarch, demanding perfection, shielding secrets that Amarachi never dared to question. Across the aisle, Chief Damien stiffened, jaw clenched, eyes assessing every gesture, every whispered word. A man bent not by love, but by power. Outside, the distant rumble of thunder briefly cut through the celebration. It was not enough to disturb the rituals. Still, for those who noticed, it felt like a cosmic warning. Pastor Ayula, heart rattling with prophetic dread, pressed onward, the ceremony moving step by step through prayer, exchange of rings, and the silent unity of two candles flickering together. It was a binding not just of flesh, but of past and future, and if fate would allow, a redemption of haunted histories. Have you ever seen the sun break through after a storm, flooding the world with light so radiant it makes the shadows cower? As Checker and Amarachi were declared husband and wife, applause erupted, unbridled and joyous, reverberating across the church walls and spilling into the open streets. The music resumed, loud and electrifying, propelling everyone toward the celebration that waited outside. Tables lined the main square, draped in rainbow cloths, heavy with food. Jollof rice, spicy meat, fried plantains, and cakes stacked like treasures. Women in traditional wrappers danced, their laughter swirling like wind through the afternoon sun. Children dashed between legs, faces smeared with icing, their joy untethered by any sorrow that clung to the older generations. Emma, always a beacon of energy, orchestrated cheers and led the men in a round of jokes so infectious that even dour Chief Damien allowed a shadow of a smile. Checker was never more himself than in these moments, free, surrounded by friends, his heart expanding with the promise of new beginnings. Amarachi, now his wife, stood at his side, a gentle counterpoint to his exuberance. Her smile softened the edges of her past, and for a rare spell, she let herself believe that happiness was not a visitor, but a resident. Mama was the center of attention. Every visitor from neighboring towns came to pay their respects, offering gifts, prayers, and long, affectionate embraces. The occasion, more than a simple wedding, was an act of communal history, an affirmation that love, hard-earned and fiercely protected, was still possible. Yet within the throng, Pastor Ayula moved carefully, watching every face, feeling every shift in the wind. He saw, with a heart more sensitive than most, the subtle dissonance between Amarachi's outward joy and the nervous glances she cast at her mother. He noticed how Madame Afima would sometimes murmur instructions with barely hidden urgency, glancing over her shoulder as if she expected unwelcome visitors at any moment. The celebration continued, a tapestry of color, sound, and intoxicating connections. Happiness flowed, raucous and unburdened. But somewhere beneath the music, a single discordant note pulsed, threatening to shatter the illusion everyone so desperately clung to. Every story built on love carries the risk of truth. What if what you cherish most is balanced upon a secret too dark to reveal? As dusk crept up, painting the sky in bruises and gold, Checker wandered away from the crowd for a moment of solitude, finding himself on the quiet veranda at the edge of the compound. Emma joined him, breathless from dancing, the laughter still sparkling in his eyes. "Man, you look like you've touched heaven," Emma teased, slapping Checker on the back. "I think I have. Today is more than I dared hope," Checker replied, his voice touched by wonder and a trace of concern. "But Amarachi seems distracted. Did you notice anything?" Emma hesitated, eyes searching the night. "Not really." "Maybe she's nervous. Marrying into our family is a big change for her. You know her people. They're proud, and they're carrying a lot." Checker frowned, remembering whispers about Amarachi's lineage, a family rumored to be descended from ancient traditions, shrouded in superstition and veiled in silent rituals. He remembered the little girl's outburst, the pastor's uneasy prayers, the chill that had laced Amarachi's gaze for just a heartbeat. But love, stronger than suspicion, pressed him forward. "I trust her," Checker said, conviction giving weight to his words. Emma grinned, slinging an arm around his shoulder. "Trust is all you need, my brother. See her heart, not the ghost stories." As the two friends watched the sky darken, a cold wind swept suddenly across the compound. The sound of singing and laughter faded into a hush. Checker shivered, sensing that the night was about to ask questions both men would struggle to answer. How do you confront the truth when it shivers beneath layers of joy? As night enveloped the wedding party, Amarachi escaped to a quiet corridor behind her family's house, her heart pounding with secrets too heavy to bear alone. Kyoma found her there, concern deepening the lines of her face. "Amora, what's wrong?" "You've been distant all evening," Kyoma murmured, wrapping an arm comfortingly around her. "I'm frightened, Kyoma," Amarachi whispered, voice trembling. "There are things I can't explain. Things about my family, about the way I feel." Kyoma leaned in, earnest. "Whatever it is, you can trust me." "You have to before it eats you from the inside." Amarachi gazed down, fighting tears. "Mama's been training me since I was a child, not in ordinary ways. I know prayers, rituals, none of the guests could understand. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see things, shadows moving where there should be light. There are nights I dream of snakes, coiling, whispering, promising power and pain if I step out of line." Kyoma stiffened, fear prickling her skin. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying, sometimes I feel something growing inside me," Amarachi admitted, her voice barely above the wind. "I love Checker. He's my peace, my sanctuary. But tonight, I felt something else. At the altar, when the pastor touched me, I was cold, so cold I thought I might break apart." Kyoma hugged her tighter. "You can overcome it. This marriage, this love, you're stronger than any curse or secret. But you must face it, Amarachi. You must tell Checker. He deserves the truth." Torn between loyalty to her mother and devotion to Checker, Amarachi wept silently, knowing the night would demand reckoning before it delivered peace. What if, as laughter faded, and guests departed, something uninvited entered your story. In the deepest part of the night, as the stars blinked against a velvet sky, a disturbance rippled through the Checker family compound. Mama was sitting by the kitchen window, thanking God for the day, when she heard it. The unmistakable hiss of a snake, close, too close, to her feet. She leapt up, heart pounding, but saw only a shadow flicker across the window pane. At the same time, Emma, restless and unable to sleep, wandered the villa's corridors, searching for some leftover food. He stumbled upon a strange scene, a flicker of candlelight, a circle of salt drawn on the floor near Amarachi's room, and Madame Ephema whispering over a tub of water, her voice low, urgent, foreign. Emma felt a chill slice through his spirit, rooted to the spot. He remembered old tales about Amarachi's lineage, about a family that made pacts with spirits and power, trading freedom for safety and secrets for salvation. But he never believed those stories until tonight. Madame Ephema caught his eye. Her gaze, hard and cold, threatened even the bravest heart. She spoke in tones commanding secrecy. "Go back to your room, boy. This is none of your concern." Emma obeyed, but the secret burned inside him. Something ancient was unfolding behind closed doors, and it would not be contained by history, tradition, or prayer. How would you sleep if you knew something unspeakable was lurking just beyond your doorstep? The wedding party had died down, leaving only the muffled echoes of music and the quiet shuffling of feet as the last guests slipped away. Checker, exhausted but blissful, sat with Amarachi on their new marriage bed, his hand encircling hers as if to anchor both of them to this one precious reality. Yet amid the stillness, Checker could not shake the aftertaste of unease. Amarachi's silence was deeper tonight, her eyes tracing invisible patterns on the wall, her breaths shallow, as if drawing air was a labor. He leaned in, brushing her cheek, searching her face for the peace he felt within her embrace. "Are you sure you're all right, my love?" he whispered, his voice breaking the silence like a fragile glass bell. Amarachi nodded, hesitant. "I wanted this day for so long, but there's a heaviness. Sometimes I feel I'm carrying a weight too old for words." Checker cradled her face. "Whatever is troubling you, you don't have to bear it alone. Not anymore." He kissed her forehead, the gesture warm, desperate, promising protection that might need to reach beyond the ordinary. As they lay together under the thin glow of a single lantern, Amarachi tried to relax, seeking the comfort of her new husband's steady presence. The moon's light slid across the room, silver on the floorboards, making even shadows appear sharp as knives. Deep in the house, Emma tossed and turned, haunted by the vision of Madame Ephema's midnight ritual. He replayed every strange detail, the salt, the whisper, the eerie way flames had danced atop the water in defiance of all natural law. Emma was no stranger to old wives' tales, but something about tonight felt different, close, immediate, and climbing beneath his skin. Down the corridor, Madame Ephema sat alone, her hands buried in folded textiles, her lips locked in a silent chant. She muttered prayers learned long before Amarachi was born, the kind meant to keep evil from a family's door, even if the cost was far greater than anyone dared admit. Tonight, though, even she wondered, had she done enough? Or had some ancient contract finally come due, demanding payment no mother could willingly offer? Would you dare to chase the truth if it threatened everything you've built? At dawn, as roosters crowed and the first embers of sunlight kindled the horizon, truth pressed through the walls of sleep and into reality. Checker awoke, to Amarachi whispering his name, her tone low and urgent. Checker, there is something I must tell you before the world wakes up, something that cannot be undone. Her hands trembled in the soft haze of morning, courage building in fits and starts. Checker sat up, heart pounding. Whatever it is, I want to know. Don't hide from me. Amarachi's voice quivered, but she did not look away. My family, we are not like others. Since I was a girl, Mama has taught me rituals to keep away the darkness. Rituals that most would call superstition, but I know are real. When you looked in my eyes yesterday at the altar, did you see something strange? He remembered the moment. A cold, otherworldly glint quickly banished. I noticed. It frightened me. But I love you, whatever it is. Tears slipped down Amarachi's cheeks. Sometimes, something inside me tries to wake up, something older than my name, something like a serpent. I fight it every day, Checker, but I don't always win. Last night, after the party, I felt it strongest. Mama was in the other room, chanting, trying to protect me from a power that's haunted my family for generations. Checker's heart twisted, caught between fright and fierce protectiveness. Then we'll fight together. I will never abandon you. We just need the truth, Amarachi. All of it. Even the painful parts. In that quiet, patched by golden sunlight, two souls learned what it takes to truly share a burden. Not just love, but understanding. A willingness to walk through night, side by side, into any dawn the world would allow. What happens when mothers must choose between the safety of a child and the curse trailing at her heels? As Amarachi confessed, Madame Ephema was at prayer in her own room, tears streaming silently down her resolute face. Her prayers, once proud and commanding, now spilled from her in weary, imploring whispers. Let this marriage not be the spark that lights an old fire. Let the serpent spirit sleep. Let my child taste happiness I could not hold for myself, she pleaded, clutching her rosary so tightly her knuckles blanched. In her memory danced scenes from her own stolen youth, the witching hour when, as a frightened girl, she too had felt her soul flicker with something cold and reptilian. It was then that Mama entered, drawn by a force she couldn't name. Two women, worlds apart by blood but bound by hopes for their children, faced one another in the dim wash of morning light. You are troubled, Mama observed gently, her voice an invitation rather than accusation. Madame Ephema considered denial, but decades of secrets pushed heavy against her chest. Amarachi is in danger, and so is your son. There are things you do not know about my lineage, curses older than these walls. Mama nodded. We all carry something that threatens to undo what we love. But please, for their sake, let truth and faith guide us today. My checker is strong, and so is your Amarachi. We must not let old wounds write their story. Madame Fema collapsed into quiet sobbing. At last, she trusted another with the truth. In that fragile moment, an alliance was born. Mothers joined in silent prayer, a bulwark against whatever darkness stalked their children's steps. Would you face a demon if it meant saving someone you love? By late morning, Checker gathered Emma, Amarachi, Mama, and, at Amarachi's request, Madame Efima, in the parlor. The room's air was charged, a circle of trust, trembling with fear and hope alike. I called you here, Checker began, voice steady but determined, because last night proved we cannot keep secrets. I love Amarachi. Whatever lives within her, whatever name it has, I want to understand it, and if possible, defeat it. Emma looked from Checker to Amarachi, and then to Madame Efima. The skepticism on his face thawing into concern. This isn't just family drama, is it? He asked quietly. Madame Efima drew a shaky breath. There is an old serpent spirit bound to our bloodline. We have rituals to keep it subdued. But major life events, especially weddings, can wake chaotic forces. Last night, I sensed it watching, seeking to possess, to ruin this union. It tried to keep it away with ancestral prayers, but I do not know if I succeeded. Amarachi wept openly, her face a portrait of fear and yearning. I love you more than anything, Checker. I want to be free. I want us to have peace. Mama stood and gathered Amarachi in her arms. Evil flees where there is love and courage. We will stand together. Tell us, what must we do? The room fell quiet as Madame Efima stepped forward, revealing a sacred bundle, herbs, strands of red cloth, a clay bowl filled with river water. Tonight, as the moon rises, we must perform the old rite again, this time with faith, with family. We must show the spirit. It cannot divide us. Checker took Amarachi's hand, squeezing as if to promise never to let go, no matter what darkness the night might deliver. Would you be brave enough to gamble your future on a ritual older than memory itself? As dusk bled across the town, the family gathered in the courtyard, the air thick with tension and the scent of sandalwood smoke. The mothers knelt at opposite ends of a chalk-drawn circle, facing the moon, which hung low and bruised, watching like a silent witness. Around them stood Emma, wide-eyed but resolute, and past the fence, Pastor Ayula, summoned by Mama for guidance and spiritual strength. He arrived, bearing anointing oil and passages of scripture, pledging faith alongside tradition. Madame Efima began, voice threaded with power and pain. Spirit of my mother's mother, serpent that calls our name, I bind you tonight by the unity of love, by the strength of two families, by the faith of old and new. You cannot have Amarachi. You cannot have her happiness. Amarachi trembled at the circle's center, Checker at her side, holding her tightly, refusing to let her fight alone. Mama and Pastor Ayula joined hands, their prayers rising and mixing with the chant, the air shimmering as if the world itself held its breath. Suddenly, a fierce wind stirred, swirling leaves and dust. A coldness pressed the gathered crowd, and Amarachi dropped to her knees, convulsing as if dragged by two opposing tides, one threatening to pull her under, the other struggling to set her free. Checker whispered words of love. Mama begged the heavens. Pastor Ayula anointed Amarachi's brow, and Madame Efima sang her family's oldest lullaby, her voice shivering but unyielding. Within the storm of voices, Amarachi's body arched, her eyes snapping open, yellow and slit, but just for an instant. The crowd tensed, but Madame Efima pressed on, summoning every drop of courage. "We cast you out. You have no home here." And then, with a final, soul-splitting scream, the air cracked. Something unseen shook loose. Amarachi fell into Checker's arms, the courtyard lying silent, electric, as the night waited to discover who, at last, had won. How do you find peace when the night has spent itself in battle? The air held the hush of exhaustion, as though the very earth had paused to recover from the struggle. Amarachi lay limp, but breathing in Checker's arms, the cold sweat of terror gradually replaced by the warmth of life and love. All around her, the circle of family and faith watched, barely daring to exhale lest they disturb a fragile calm. Mama was the first to move, reaching out to touch Amarachi's brow with her trembling palm. "She is awake. God has spared us," she whispered, awe and relief tangled in her voice. Emma, silent and overwhelmed, knelt and thanked the heavens under his breath. Madame Efima did not smile, but her rigid posture relaxed. For the first time in years, she felt hope, thin, tentative, yet persistent, pushing against the wall of loss and fear inside her chest. Her voice, raw from ritual and emotion, turned gentle. "My daughter, you have been brave. The spirit that haunted us may not return soon, but if it ever does, we will face it as one family, not as enemies." Pastor Ayula prayed softly, hands tracing the air above Amarachi and Checker. His voice was resonant, filled with gratitude and warning. There are many kinds of darkness. The deepest are those we carry in silence. May the unity of this night strengthen you always against any shadow. Amarachi opened her eyes slowly. Checker pressed his lips to her forehead, whispering words meant to rebuild and restore. "You are free, my love. You are safe." Around them, the stars shone brighter than ever. The family understood that true peace is earned by facing terror together, and were determined never again to allow secrets to isolate them from each other's hearts. Can hope truly grow from the ashes of old pain? The new day unfolded quietly, as if the world itself was afraid to interrupt the fragile joy earned at such cost. Checker and Amarachi were greeted with gentle sunlight filtering through windows, no longer shadowed by fear. The family rose together, sleepy yet invigorated by a renewal that was more spiritual than physical. At breakfast, laughter returned, soft at first, then louder, spreading like fire through the house. Mama served stew and bread with hands that trembled less with fatigue and more with happiness. Emma recounted stories from the previous day, his voice animated with relief. I swear, I will never doubt old rituals again. Not after last night. Madame Efima watched Amarachi eat, noting the difference in her demeanor. A wariness that once haunted her eyes had retreated, replaced by a calm acceptance. Amarachi looked up, smiled, and for the first time addressed her mother fearlessly. I am proud of my heritage, Mama, but I do not want its darkness to shape my future. Madame Efima nodded, her eyes moist. Then we will find new ways together. I am glad you have found love strong enough to challenge even blood's oldest bindings. Checker and Amarachi shared a glance, the warmth between them now unclouded. The bond was no longer simply a marriage. It had become their shared victory against ancient pain. At that table, as the morning light swept away the ghosts of yesterday, redemption became a story for all to witness. The family pledged resolve. Together, they would choose openness, strength, and love over secrecy and isolation. What stories do communities tell when they witness transformation firsthand? The tale of Checker and Amarachi spread quickly through the town, shared in markets, whispered in churches, retold with amazement. People spoke not just of the wedding, but the storm and its aftermath. Unsure of the exact details, but certain of its meaning. Mama visited her friends and neighbors, her pride shining. Our family is whole and our children are blessed, she declared. Villagers gathered, their faces hungry for the lessons beneath the miracle. Chief Damien, who had watched with skepticism, now sought out Checker and Amarachi, bowing his head in respect. You have shown more courage than any chief in our history, he admitted. I was wrong to fear the union, now I see its value. Even Pastor Ayula stood before the church congregation and spoke of unity and overcoming darkness. Let this be a lesson, he preached. When we stand together in faith, not even old spirits can break us. Let us reject fear and superstition and choose community. Emma was the star of stories told at the local bar, his retelling growing more dramatic with each audience. Did you see the way Checker held Amarachi? Like a lion protecting his queen, Amarachi's old friends approached her shyly, congratulating her not only for her marriage, but for her newfound courage. You showed us it's possible to defy even those things we think are written in the stars, Kioma whispered, holding Amarachi's hands with deep admiration. The community felt revitalized, the old tales of curse and fear replaced by a new narrative, that of unity, courage, and shared strength. Checker and Amarachi became symbols, not of haunted bloodlines, but of hope's power to emerge from trials. Is love not the greatest miracle of all? In the weeks that followed, Checker and Amarachi settled into their home, weaving ordinary joys from the extraordinary trial they had survived. They gardened together, laughter and teasing echoing against the walls that remembered a night of terror. Each day, their bond deepened, forged not just by passion, but by the shared scars they bore. Checo worked in his shop, more respected than ever. Customers now trusted him with both their business and their stories, knowing he had braved encounters with things neither money nor status could shield a person from. Amarachi found her own peace, teaching children and guiding young girls who struggled with fear or the burden of family secrets. Her compassion, sharpened by the ordeal, made her a beacon for those too shy to speak their truths. Mama and Madame Ephema continued to meet, no longer bound only by ceremony, but by genuine friendship. They planned family gatherings, healed old wounds with laughter and prayer, and reminded each other that history need not dictate happiness. Emma visited often, teasing and joking, while also ensuring that the family remembered the importance of vigilance. Lessons bloom. We all learn from what happened, but we must never let small shadows become monsters again. Chief Damien worked quietly to support other marriages, eager to breed harmony rather than conflict. Pastor Ayula became a counselor to couples on the edge of despair, guiding them with wisdom earned through hardship. But at the heart of all this, Checker and Amarachi's love grew, reborn by fire, unbreakable, guiding the whole community toward a future less afraid and much more free. What is the true legacy of a battle bravely fought? Years later, when the story of Checker and Amarachi's wedding was told to new generations, it was remembered not just as a day of union, but a day when old traditions and new courage merged into something beautiful and lasting. People gathered during festivals and pointed to their home as an example of what unity could achieve. Young lovers believed that curses could be broken. Elders recounted how trust and joint action had transformed a fearful legacy into hope. Checker, now a proud father, taught his children to value truth, to never shrink from darkness, and to always cleave to faith and love. Amarachi led community lessons, teaching that pain could become strength and that family is forged not by blood alone, but by choices made together. Mama found deep peace in her old age, honored as a matriarch who had anchored her family through bitter storms. Madame Ephema grew softer, more open, her legacy redeemed by the courage of her daughter and the forgiveness of shared burdens. Emma, still a friend to all, laughed as he retold their tale, urging every bride and groom, "Face your shadows together, no matter how old or fierce." And Pastor Ayula kept the faith, reminding the town at every wedding that love, pure, determined, was always the strongest force. Lessons bloom. Thus, the story lived on. More than folklore, an anthem of faith unbent, of families refusing to let shadows divide them, and of a love so mighty it changed not just a home, but a community forever.